Hi there, and welcome to Be a Global Citizen, the podcast that explores the concept of global citizenship through the lens of value-creating education. My name is Scott Bauer, and I'm a Soka researcher and educator. I hope you find the discussions, stories, and insights on this podcast to be valuable and inspiring as we strive to become global citizens who are committed to living a contributive life. Enjoy.
Hi everyone, my name is Yukari and I'm currently here in Costa Mesa, in Orange County, and I am originally from Brazil, and currently I work as a vice principal at a public charter school here in Costa Mesa, and I look forward to, talking to and listening to Scott and just learning from one another. Thank you.
Thank you, Yukari. Welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you. We've connected in Brazil, and I find that our paths, very much kind of are running parallel in terms of our interest in Soka education, humanistic education, and it's just, I'm excited to learn more about the pioneering work that you're doing at this charter school in Costa Mesa. Also, really curious to learn more about your experiences when you were growing up in Brazil. You, I believe, were part of the first class of the Brazil Soka School, and I had the great honor of working at the Soka School myself for a brief period. And and just kind of wanting to know how that also informed your worldview, your dreams and hopes as not just a student, but now as an educator, and also interested to learn about this transition from Brazil coming to the US. There's so much, and I'm excited to hear more about your journey as a global citizen. Wanted to pass it over to you, and please, feel free to share out your journey. What were some of the milestones, influences, the ups and the downs? I'm also looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, thank you so much, Scott. Muito obrigada. Um, so my name is Yukari, as I mentioned, and I had such a fortune to grow up in a Soka education environment. I I joined a Soka school in Brazil as they were really like opening the school. So I was part of the first class in first grade, and every time they will open a new grade, I will be part of, the second grade and then open the third grade. And so I had the opportunity to just really grow up in that environment. And then I ended up going to Soka University in Japan for my undergrad program. And then I went to Soka University of America. So I feel like I am a product of Soka education in that way, and I'm so fortunate. But just my journey started just by looking at. I've always had so much interest in kids. I feel like working with kids would always give me such a joy, and I started working with kids when I was 14 years old. As just part of my Buddhist activities, I would just really work together and with the kids ages 6 to 9, and then kids from 14 to 17. So it's really promoting peace, culture, and education activities. I was also part of a dance kind of group. So we had just different opportunities to engage, and I always loved working with kids. And when I was also 17, I realized that I really wanted to work with kids with physical disabilities and mental disabilities. So that's when I had a very short 3-month internship at a hospital where the people would work with physical therapy and OT and speech and things like this. And I just remember just how much people have so much potential in their lives. And I remember there was a child who didn't have his arms or legs. And then he asked me like, can I play bowling with you? And I said, sure. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, how? But then I set up, the bowling strikes and everything on the floor. And then he literally like with his whole body, like just really came out from the wheelchair, and then, with his head, he started to play. And I was just so amazed by how much people, how I was able to overcome my own sense of bias of what is possible and what is not. And, how everybody, regardless of their age or physical, or mental abilities, how they have such an immense potential in their lives, and how much I really wanted to learn from one another and learn from the kids. So yeah, fast forward, I couldn't speak English at that time. I was, just the basics. I couldn't study, or I couldn't speak English even though I had studied, but my dad gave me the opportunity to study in Canada. And I was, that was my first time going abroad, and I met people from different backgrounds. And I knew I wanted to challenge beyond my comfortable zone of friendship through dialogue. And I realized that there's no right or wrong. It's just everybody has a different approach. Then after my time in Canada, I'm like, this is great. Making friends across the world is great. And then my real goal was to actually come to SUA, to Soka University of America, but I ended up going to Soka University in Japan at the Faculty of International Liberal Arts. It was part of the second class, and that was amazing. It was like the best thing, poison into medicine ever, majoring in educational and, leadership development. And I had the opportunity to just continue to work with the kids. And throughout, my 4 year when I was in Japan, I actually had several conversations in regards to what do I want to do in my life that only I could do. Not the things that I just wanted or the things that I needed to do, but only the things that I could do. And so I remember one time I had to go back to Brazil. And that was the epiphany why I decided to pursue education as my career path, which was a little bit intense. But, I went back to Brazil after my study abroad in London. And then when I was in Brazil, there was one morning that I literally woke up in shock because I heard my mom screaming. And I was like, what's happening? And then I realized that there were like voices in my house that I didn't recognize. And then pretty much I realized that, wow, there's probably you're in a situation of danger. So I went back to my room, I locked myself, and then I called the police. And so pretty much we were held hostage for 30 minutes at my house. And then, luckily the police was able to come, and just so much protection from our prayers too. But then I realized that those people who entered my house and made my family hostage was pretty much the same age as I. They were really young. They were 20-year-olds at that time. And I really questioned, like, why this is happening to me and my family. And, we're the same age, but why do we have different paths in life? The only difference, of course, is the privilege of study and, being able to grow up in a different environment. So I just realized that education is the most powerful and, the slowest, but the most powerful way that we can transform, society through education. And that's when, after my time in Japan, I decided to come to study at Soka University of America in the master's program in educational leadership for societal change. And then it was pandemic time. So I was in America for about 7 months. And then I had to go back to Brazil to do a year and a half via Zoom. But the most beautiful time is that I was pursuing my dream of studying at my dream university, which was Soka University of America, while living with my family in Brazil, because I left Brazil in 2013. So it had been almost 7 years since I didn't have the opportunity to live with my family. And to be honest, that the last, the year and a half that I spent with my family was the last time that I had to spend with my dad, because he eventually passed away. My grandma passed away. My uncle passed away. So that year and a half was really important in my personal life. And I really treasure that memory together. So yeah, I came back to the US in 2021. to find an opportunity to work in education here in America. And then I was hired as an office manager at the public charter school that is called International School for Science and Culture. And we do different things, which I'm sure we're going to talk about later. And then thanks to the trust that I received from the executive director and everybody at the school, after a few months, I was promoted as the assistant principal. And that was the last time I talked to my dad. I told my dad, like, Dad, I am, getting promoted. I'm gonna be the assistant principal. And then the week after, my dad passed away. So I feel like he really waited for me to just have this full completion, Soka education. And just like being able to, work in a school. And then, this has been a journey itself. But I'm completing my 5th year working at this charter school. And that's a little bit of my journey of like why I decided to pursue education, a little bit about my personal background, and where I am right now.
Wow. Thank you so much, Yukari. That was beautifully said. And there's just so much, right, that you experienced that, really left like profound marks on you as far as, what you did, how you processed various events. And I think these really bold decisions about what path do you want to take, from the different options, like where did you want to go and study? Where did you want to work? In what area, right? Working with kids and finding yourself at an international school here in California. I think it's so like all those experiences have culminated in this current job that you were working at, and then what you were sharing about family and all those important influences on your life, and it's just wow. I I'm just amazed that you've been in this kind of Soka system for pretty much all your life, from kindergarten, all right, all the way to university, and graduate studies as well. On top of that, I think you're probably one of the few who have experienced that in the world, and definitely from Brazil. So there's a sense of like kind of pioneering this path. But I'm sure, right, when your family decided to put you in the kindergarten at the Soka school, it wasn't really your choice. At that age, it's probably just like your family were like, nope, this is happening. This is what you're going to do. So you were always at the forefront of like the next new grade and kind of building out new traditions and figuring out what does this kind of Soka education mean. I'd love to hear, what was it like being in that kind of like spotlight as a pioneer from one year to the next, to the next, to the next.
Mm.
And how has like your understanding and appreciation of Soka education grown over the years to encompass like kindergarten all the way to graduate studies?
Yeah, thank you. Oh my gosh, I used to hate school, not Soka school. I remember I went to school for like when I was maybe 2 or 3, and it was like hell for me. Like I did not want to go to school. I remember like my mom would drive and I would be very serious at the back seat. I'm like, I'm gonna run. She's not gonna get me, she's not gonna catch me. I'm just gonna like play tag. And then the moment she would park, like the front door, gentleman with the principal plus my mom would come to the car, and then I would be jumping, to the front seat, to the back seat, to the middle seat. And like, it was so difficult for me to get to school because I was always the last one to, go home, and I didn't like that. And then when my mom told me that I was going to a different school that was even further away because I had to drive like 45 minutes, but with traffic in São Paulo, it would take an hour and a half to go to school in the morning. I'm like, are you guys insane? Like, I don't like school. And then when I joined Soka school, I was so happy. I was like complaining that it was the weekend because I really wanted to be in school, and I don't have siblings. So like going to school became like going home. I felt like I was so happy, and it was such a small community at that time. I only had like maybe 12, 13 students in my class. And I think because we were so small, I had such a privilege and opportunity to really bond with everybody in my class and, all of my staff, the staff that, that I was looking at Soka School. So I feel like it was such a privilege and a responsibility too, because they were like, Yukari, you guys are first class. Like, you guys are going to be showcasing like with the product of Soka education in Brazil. And I'm like, yes, okay. So I think I learned, how to take on responsibilities even in a young age. And I feel like this has been such a fortune because it really helped me expand of like what was possible at that time. And yeah, I actually ended up graduating from 8th grade, from the junior high, elementary school in Brazil. And then they didn't open, the high school. And at that time, I really thought about, will I ever be happy again? Because I was so happy studying at Soka School. I'm like, I don't think I can be that happy anymore. It's impossible. Like my happiness has already reached a certain limit. But yeah, I ended up going to a regular private high school for 3 years. And every time we would talk about my own experience, all of my friends would be jealous. Like, why did I not go to Soka School? Like, I wanted, to go to Soka School, and I was able to share a lot about Soka education. And then, I went back to Soka World. I ended up going to Soka University and Soka University of America. So yeah, I think it was my opportunity and my greatest joy, just like growing up in a very small setting, learning 3 languages. And I think that really helped me to imagine, different possibilities and just have a sense of pride. I'm part of like this first endeavor here in Brazil, and I'm going to do my best to repay my debt of gratitude. So when I went through tough times, like losing my dad, like the reason why I feel like I cannot give up is because I have my friends and I have people that trusted me. And that's how I want to continue to be. I want to be an educator, like the people, the educators are supporting me. I want my kids to feel the same way that I felt when I was in Soka School, like feeling safe, feeling a sense of community, and feeling like a sense of belonging. And that's for me, even though I'm not working in a Soka education, I feel like that's my mission as a Soka educator. I want them to feel Soka education through my own life and my own care. So yeah, it has been a great reference in my life. And I feel like I have to multiply this feeling, this care for other people too. So thank you for asking.
Yeah. No, thank you, Yukari. The way that you share about it's very evident that you truly loved your time at the Soka School, that it was this warm community, super supportive. And I love how you phrased that, going to school felt like going home. And you don't really hear that, especially, from my, here in the United States, school is often kind of felt like viewed as, oh, I don't want to go there. It's like, kicking and screaming. But, the friends that you made at the school, um, I don't know, could you speak a little bit about like, well, what made those connections so strong? And yeah, if you can maybe share like something more about like, how was it that they were able to create this like culture of care, this kind of loving environment? Like, what's the secret? Were they, was there
Right.
any like particular, event that they did, or was it more of a mindset that teachers had, or like what brought everyone together to
Good.
enable a kind of environment like that for like friendships to blossom? Like, yeah, what was
Good.
going on?
Yeah. I think, I really felt that everybody cared about me. I didn't feel like I was obligated, um, to go to school. I felt like it was a choice for me. And not even a choice. It was like, this is my right. I want to go to school. And I believe it was because of everybody's care and support and love. As I said, I think I grew up in a very small environment. Soka School at that time was really small. So if one person was absent, at that, the class would be, the dynamics would be completely different. So I feel like I have to be there because I want to create a positive environment. I think I really felt, with my friends that everybody had a part. I had a friend who was really smart, and then if he wasn't in the class, then sometimes, I couldn't understand things clearly. And then I had, a lot of good friends that like if they wouldn't be there, then, I think we were really close. And we were really had a shared purpose of like we are part of the first class and we have this purpose of being able to contribute to the school, even though we are so young. So I think the sense of contribution, like our part, playing our role at a small new school, I think gave us a lot of positive responsibilities that we wanted to actively engage and support the school. And yeah, I think my friends too, like we had a very similar kind of philosophy of education, being able to, become global citizens and like learning and really just learning and getting inspired from one another. And yeah, I just felt like I wasn't being punished at the school. I felt like I was being protected and loved by everybody, even like the recess staff, the admin people, my PE teachers, my music teachers. I just felt like they knew me as if I was part of their family. It was like, "Oh, Yukari, how are you doing?" And like, "How is your mom?" They would ask me questions that I would feel like I'm seen and I am heard and I matter. So I feel like, yeah, it's not something so complex. It's just really part of maybe the philosophy of education from each of the staff that really allowed me to feel comfortable and feel like I belong here. So yeah, I don't know if that makes sense or if it's clear.
Yeah, you're very clear, and it's just again like seemingly like this kind of environment. It almost sounds like utopian, right? Given the landscape of schools nowadays, where there's this kind of I don't know this sense of I don't dread of going to school or the dullness of like what am I actually learning in school, sense of alienation as far as like the social connections that are formed there, as well as the actual content and curriculum that is being provided for the students to learn. There's just a lot of like seemingly disconnected stuff, and then just more and more is added onto it. But like what you described is like there's this like purity of like intention, this like deep understanding that all of us here, from like teachers and all the staff and the families, everyone is oriented towards the happiness of this one student, right? That, you know, something like, welcoming a student as they're walking into school in the morning and genuinely expressing to them, I'm so happy that you're here. That smile, that welcoming feeling, like that's that's something very unique. But it shouldn't be. That you talked about education as like as a right, and that this
Yeah.
form of education is a privilege. But I'm curious. Could you like maybe speak a little bit more about like how is it that like this approach to like education that you have, this educational philosophy, how how are you kind of incorporating that or embodying that in your current work as a vice principal? Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, and then from your efforts, is that something that like you're building out this new culture? Is the goal to like have your charter school become the same kind of like environment as the Soka school that you experienced?
Yes. So pretty much the school that I currently work for, they opened in 2019 and I joined the team in 2021. It was the first year in person, fully in person. And the founder of the school, also has a similar Soka education philosophy. And she really thought thoroughly about the school, for about 10 years. She has 5 different degrees, PhD in computer science and everything. And her passion was education, but she never had the opportunity to, put into practice in her own school. So the mission is very similar to Soka education, which is to cultivate global citizens, empower to contribute to a positive society, and very similar to Soka school of the way that I grew up. We also learn 3 languages, so the students they have the opportunity to choose between Japanese or Chinese, and then everybody learns Spanish, and then English is taught in all of the subjects. I also grew up in that environment, like I had Japanese, had English, and then Portuguese. Um, and I think also being a small school, we only have 145 students. That allows a lot of closeness between each student as well as each staff and to the families. And I love that because I feel like I know all of the teachers, I know all of the staff, I know all of the students, I know all of the parents by heart. I know everybody's name, I know everybody's situation, and we just keep growing as, very tight, as a tight community. Like everybody cares about one another. And if one person is affected, it really affects the whole class and the whole community, therefore. So I feel like because of that, it really empowers me. Instead of seeing my students really far, I see them really close to me and seeing and really caring for them as if I am responsible for what, my principal says for the long-term happiness of the kids. She really asks each staff and each professor, at the school to really think about the long-term happiness of each child that steps into the school. So I feel like for me personally too, it's a great challenge to understand from a teacher's perspective of what it means to care for somebody so deeply, and really also help me to improve myself as an educator, as an administrator, and as a person, how I really can deeply care for somebody who might not be feeling their best, who might have, so many things happening in their personal life, and really expand my compassion to the person in front of me. And I feel like it's a great training for me to be exposed that, how do you feel hope when there's no hope, right? How do I give hope to people when they are not feeling hopeful? And I think that has been the greatest challenge in applying Soka education in my daily life. And I think it really comes from my practice as well, being able to nourish, the best in myself, and really thinking about, the founder of, the school, Dr. Desaki Kira, who really fostered me as, and as a student. And I also had to foster my kids with the same mentality. So every time I go to school, I'm like, Sensei, you gotta come with me to the school. If you stay at home, it's gonna be a mess. You gotta come with me. We're gonna go together hand in hand, and we're gonna treasure and care for each student. And that has been like the greatest lesson that I've, also I'm able to develop as an educator. So I think having a small setting, and being able to emphasize in a global citizenship education, really bringing the students to have that sense of ownership and responsibilities for their life is very empowering. Like, I matter, my voice matters, and I want to do something about it. So it goes beyond their, self. It's really expanding towards something else. And yeah, I hope it's clear.
It is. And this expansive quality of your appreciation for what you experienced at the Soka school, and then now in this different school environment, but similarly like structured in that it's small. Everyone really gets to know each other, really support each other. There's this international component as far as the languages that they learned, and I think also this understanding that their purpose, like what they're going to contribute into society, will be unique and important, and that their voice matters, like you said, but also their dreams and what they want to change in the world also really matters. And yeah, I find that this emphasis on their long-term happiness, right? The way that the principal framed that is very interesting. The word happiness gets tossed around a lot, I think, in just day-to-day life, right? People talk, I'm so happy I got this new thing that I bought, or I'm so happy that, I got to have this experience. But long-term happiness within this context of a school, I think it's going to mean something different. And I would imagine, ties into part of what their mission is, or their purpose for studying. I'd like to hear from you, though. Could you unpack that a little bit more? What does long-term happiness mean? And how does that connect to this concept of global citizenship?
Yeah. So, I mean, being in a Soka environment, I learned what it feels like to have an education that everybody has the purpose of, like global citizenship. But at the school that I currently work, I'm able to understand how we can create education for global citizenship. And some of the things that, we talked about, which is a trilingual education, is very important, being able to not just speak the language, but really understand the culture, the cultural elements that, it's very interesting. And then there's something with the brain that my principal always says, like you learn three languages. It doesn't matter which languages, as long as it's three, it really unlocks something that you also learning the fourth and the fifth language will be much easier. And something happens with the brain when you're learning three languages. So that's why the trilingual education is very important, and being able to connect with people from different parts of the world. And also we do this, long-term sense of happiness is really about being hopeful. I think it's really attached to how can we be hopeful in times when there is no hope, right? And there's this concept that Dr. Daisaki Kid always says, if you don't feel hope, it's time to create hope. But how do you create hope when things are not hopeful? And then, yesterday we were having this dialogue with the kids, because we had a workshop with one of the nonprofits. And then that was a question, how do you feel hope when there's no hope? And some of the kids, just shared, thinking about their family, talking to friends. And I think, religion was something that the kids also brought up. So I think it's thinking about the long-term happiness, in my opinion, is really how can I create a space and an environment where kids can learn how to be hopeful, and not the hope that, oh, nobody showed to my party, or like, how I'm not going to give up on my dreams and on myself. And that sense of feeling hopeful and not giving up on myself and my dreams, I think that's the challenge that we try to do, and we try to have conversation with the kids, and sometimes it's not easy. And I think that's my personal challenge as well. Like, how can I create an environment where they feel like they belong and they feel comfortable sharing, their thoughts and their challenges with one another. And yeah, it's very painstaking. It takes every single day connecting with them and creating a space where not just the students, but even the staff can also believe in the long-term happiness of the kids. Because sometimes the kids were struggling. They show up, in various ways, whether it's behavior, whether, in different ways. And sometimes, it can be exhausting for the staff and for the educators as well. So also working with the staff, and remember, that's the purpose. They're acting like this, not because they don't like you, it's because something deeper is going on in their family. And then we have to really dig deep with the teacher for them to also understand, how can I also pursue long-term happiness for other people and for themselves? So yeah, it's not easy, but that's the way that our school is working towards the long-term happiness of each child. Is really working in partnership with everyone that is in contact with the student. And yeah, it's a great training. It's not easy. It's much easier to just think about testing and nothing else, but really focusing on the long-term happiness, meaning how they can be hopeful, how can they not give up, it's the real work. And that's why I love education. That's why I sign up for education.
I love how you've used this word several times already in our conversation, the word training. And this is not training for SATs, right? But it sounds more like training for life, because whether they're right now in school, but then when they get older, they go into their working lives, maybe start their own families, things will get difficult. And what you were talking about, the importance of how do you have hope when seemingly everything is hopeless? How do you make hope when there is nothing around you? And I think that this deeper sense that like I'm working towards a goal. I'm reaching out and I want to support someone else who might be going through very difficult times too. And you said, I'm not going to give up. All of those things sound like the training for life that is not necessarily in a booklet that is curriculum, but it sounds like this kind of like swirling, I don't know, this dance of different kind of energies that are taking place, not just amongst the students, but also amongst your teachers and your staff. And I would imagine, right, this takes time to really like process and to like really understand. And sometimes people don't want to do the work of making sense of why did this particular student walk into class feeling this way, or a teacher walking in dealing with something very heavy on their heart, but still having to smile in front of their class, right, to go through the lesson. So many things like that happen on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis. And I agree with you. I think that's what makes the school environment challenging, but also that's where learning takes place. And I wanted to ask this because you shared very openly in a very vulnerable way about how the time spent at like when you were doing your graduate studies, it was back in Brazil, and it was a year and a half where you got to realize your dream of studying at SUA at Soka University of America, but also be able to spend time with family. And then coming back after, there was this period of grief, right? Of losing loved ones and navigating a brand new job where you're stepping into leadership, the pressures of leadership. And again, all of that's taking place while you're, trying to really inspire your staff and, really encourage your students. I just want to ask, like, what was that experience like for you, and how did you find the courage to not give up through that? Because
Yeah.
you're what you're doing is you are modeling exactly what it means to expand yourself and to really like lean into the training of life. Nothing gets past students, so they pick up on the good, the bad, and the ugly.
That's
But
right.
from your experience, like, yeah, what was it like having to show up to school and
Mm-hmm.
and undergo
Yes.
all of that, but at the same time realize that there is a light at the end of the tunnel? How do you get through that?
Yeah. Thank you, Scott. I don't think I don't think I have a you know there is a podcast that asks me questions like this. So I really appreciate you taking that perspective, because this is really behind the scenes, and I think that's so empowering for everybody who does that their own way. In my own experience, it was really difficult, as it is for everybody else who are going through grief. And for me, losing 3 people in 10 months was even more intense, because it was my grandma, then 4 months my dad, and then 4 months my uncle. So it was from five of us to just my mom and I. And I had just came back here to America. So my mom was by herself and going through so much. And yeah, I remember feeling so overwhelmed and feeling like I'm gonna survive one more day. And at that time, things were going like crazy at school. And being able to, after the pandemic, especially, the kids were not sitting in their seat for 6 hours, and, teachers coming back and having to deal with so crazy, so much crazy stuff, and so many emotional, charges after the pandemic too. So it was really intense. It was very draining. I felt like for 4 months, I didn't have the strength to do anything else. And I would literally go to work and then survive and then come back home and not do anything because I felt like if I don't talk to people, if I don't interact, if I just isolate, my feelings are going to calm down and then I'm able to just be myself again. And I realized that I was doing that for 4 months and nothing was working. You know, my depression was still there. I was still feeling on the edge and I was really tired. I'm like, I don't want to feel like this anymore. I want to just expand and feel free and just be able to thrive again. And that's when, my practice of chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo really came to being able to understand that my circumstances do not define my happiness, even though that's how we felt. I really started to see my practice in a different way. Feeling happy or feeling hopeful, not because things were hopeful, but because I had to create hope. Because what is the other way? There's no other way. And just little by little being able to connect with, my community, my Buddhist community was so important at that time, really making me understand that everybody goes through tough stuff and that's not the end of the world. We're gonna make through as long as we keep moving forward and keep chanting and just keep, making causes, to really be able to transform. And at that time, I remember I had a student, that, he's graduating this year, but he came to my office because he got in trouble. Every time somebody gets in trouble, they come to me because I'm just his principal. So I'm like, okay, here we go. And then I'm like, why? What's going on? Why you're not paying attention in class? And then he said, because I'm afraid that my dad is going to become homeless. And he lost his job. And I'm afraid that my dad is going to become homeless and that he's going to make bad choices again. And I don't want that to happen. And so I'm like, holy cow, how can I share hope with this kid? I'm also feeling hopeless too, but I really talk to him and I say, don't worry. I really appreciate how much you really care for your dad. And that means the world to him. Regardless of what he's going through, he's so lucky to have such an amazing son like you. And please, whatever you need to, if you need time, if you want to talk, anything, I'm here for you. And yeah, things like, of course, his family was able, everything's okay. But I really felt at that time, he really helped me to understand what it means to be hopeful. And, little by little, I was able to also create that in my own life. And yeah, being able to overcome my own sadness and my own grief, through the work and really being able to study and chanting, connecting with people and making causes was such a beautiful foundation that I was able to create, not based on fear, but really based on a new foundation in my life. So I'm very grateful at the end that I had the opportunity to go through that by myself because I feel like that gave me a new foundation in my life. And I feel like now that I am the continuation of my family, being able to do the same things that they have done for me. So I see more as a heritage that I received from my family and that I want to keep moving forward. So yeah, for those, I'm sure many of educators might be going through some really tough things. And I appreciate, everybody who's doing the hard things and really building that foundation in their life. Yeah, it's definitely not easy, but I was so tired of feeling like that. I'm like, that's it. I don't want to continue to feel this way. And I think the practice was really important for me. The training was very important for me to make causes too. So
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, Yukari. And I mean, your heart is just so big and expansive, but I also just appreciate you sharing very honestly that, yeah, life gets really heavy, can be very difficult, and then you find yourself in situations where you have to make a decision as far as how do you want to show up? How do you want to show up for yourself? How do you want to show up for others? And when you were sharing this story about this student of yours, and the student, right, with a lot of troubles at home, and then feeling comfortable enough to share that with you, right? Saying, hey, these are some of my deep feelings about what's going on, and I'm scared, right? Naming that. For you to step into that space with that student, right? Basically leaving all of your anxieties and fears, but willingly going into the anxiety and fears of another person. I feel like that is true empathy. And it's never with this sense that I'm going to fix it for you, but it sounded like you were there as like an ally, that you were there as a friend, you were there to tell them like you're not alone. And there's something so empowering about that, because from that decision on your part to go there with this student, um, you probably realize that like that sparked something within that student to take an action, to say something, to to show that hope, and then that serves as a reminder for you back in your world of anxiety and fear and uncertainty that it's possible, right? And so I feel like this empathy, it's like a superpower, right? That you have to really hone, right? And it's part of the training, but it's contrary to what often I think people assume. If you're going through a lot of stuff, self-isolate, right? Let the dust settle down. When in reality, what you're describing is actually no, like this is actually the moment where we need to really engage with others and think about how can we contribute to their lives as well, because hence that's going to then reflect back on ourselves. So, that's a really powerful example, I think, of you really carrying out the work of a global citizen, someone who genuinely cares for others, it recognizes that interconnectedness, and through empathy is able to help them take action based on their own sense of hope, not hope that you've necessarily given to them, but that they've like unlocked within themselves. And so, yeah, I mean, I just wanted you to know that you're doing really amazing work, and that, it speaks to, yeah, so many, like that heritage, right? Or the inheritance that you were talking about, of so many people, who also were going through a lot of things, but willingly decided like, no, Yukari's going through something. I want to be there for her. I want her to know that she's important, and that she deserves all the happiness, and that she will get through this. And I just think that, yeah, the work that you're doing at that school is so needed, and it's very much presenting itself as a model for, I think, what all schools should be striving to do. So, I wanted to ask you, well, if it's possible, even, right, this concept of global citizenship, when someone asks you, if you can just kind of like summarize this briefly, what are some of like the kind of important components of global citizenship that you really kind of make clear that this is what we really need to focus on? Um, I think that we've
Good.
kind of touched upon many different things, but if you can kind of bring it together a little bit more, that would be, yeah, very interesting.
Mm. Yeah, thank you so much for summarizing of what I wanted to share. And I think this component are reaching beyond my reality and acting and thinking for the sake of others. For me, from my own personal experience and from my childhood experience working at Soka Education, not working and leaving Soka Education in my life, for me, global citizenship means that, being able to have the compassion to reach beyond my reality and thinking about the sake of others and for the greater good of the other people, the people around me and people around the world. And for me, that is exactly how I was able to break through, Scott. It wasn't like, me, because it was me for 4 months and it didn't work out. I had to think about somebody else, and thinking about somebody else, pushing my limits of what felt so uncomfortable to do. Like I would reach out to people like, hey, do you guys want to meet up and study? And people are like, yes, Yukari, please, I'm struggling. And I'm like, no, I gotta go now. I already texted them asking, I will literally force me to just meet one person on the weekend so I could connect and share and really showing up for other people. I wasn't showing up for other people. I was showing up for myself. And I remember, meeting people and I'm like, gosh, you have no idea how difficult it was for me for to be here. It was so difficult, but I'm so happy that I have you to even like have the opportunity to just grab something and chant and study. And I feel like I'm so fortunate to be able to be here and challenge that. So from my own experience, like really global citizenship is this sense of act and compassion to really reach beyond my own immediate reality and also understand and learn from, one another, from their own cultures, and really create an action that can impact both oneself and others in a very mutual and positive way. And through studying Daisuke Kira's own sense of global citizenship, it really gave me this framework, right? That it's courage, wisdom, and compassion, and really becoming the foundation elements for global citizenship. And it's always like, how can I act? How can I base everything on this humanistic framework that even though we're so different, but we all have the same potential in our lives. And I feel like that gave me the empowerment to just really continue to act and work for that purpose, to really expand beyond my self-centeredness and really help me to become a better person and overcome my own sense of, challenges as well.
Thank you so much. That I love what you shared, how you shared it, and it's backed by so many rich experiences that you've had to really like overcome, and prove to yourself, and this sense that like you can do so much more than you realize, and it's not just about you kind of paving this new path forward, but you bring with you so many others, and your efforts of like showing up for other people in a way also is showing up for yourself, right? They're so connected, and yeah, and so it's just very encouraging to hear you share that, and then a nice reminder for myself as well in terms of things that I need to break through in my life too. So thank you so much, Yukari. And we are kind of starting to get to the tail end of our conversation. It's been so wonderful to hear about your exciting journey of living in different parts of the world, but at the same time deeply engaging with communities around you, with young people, striving together, going through hard times and also very, very joyful times, as you're expanding this learning environment, and extending Soka education to the school and the wider Orange County area. I wanted to ask final question. This is the book or movie recommendation. So anything you'd like to share to the listeners?
Yeah, I think there's so much people and examples that really can talk more about what it means to be an educator who cares for the long-term happiness of the students, and books and movies that really help me to also think about my own biases and really work around the things that I needed to work for. One of my favorite movies and kind of organizations that I love and I feel like they really embody that is the Freedom Riders. I'm sure you probably heard about them. And yeah, I usually they usually come to my school every year to work with the kids, talking about social and emotional learning and everything. So I'm so excited that this partnership is kept going. And yeah, she came for my master's as a professor, and we were able to spend 3-4 days together, just really talking and understanding what it means to, be that kind of educator that Erin Gruwell is. So I highly recommend Freedom Riders. And for biases as an educator, one of my favorite movies is Monster. It's a Japanese movie that talks about biases. And for any educator in the world, I highly recommend. This recommendation came from one of my best friends from Soka School in Brazil. Shout out to Luis. He's doing his PhD at Soka University in Japan right now. But he recommended me this movie, and it's just incredible. Highly recommend you, Scott, to watch as well. And one book that I was thinking was also it's in Portuguese, so maybe you can read. But it's about positive education. I'm really interested in how we can bring the best from the students. And as an assistant principal, I have to deal with consequences and discipline very often. And what I learned from this book, but also working at, the school together with my principal, is that the best way that we can bring the best is by praising the students. Praise, 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 not because sometimes that they deserve, but because we're praising the humanity of the student. And when you praise them, when you see them, that's the way that they bring their best self and they are able to relax and just be the best versions of themselves. I see that all the time, year after year. I have kids with so much, they struggle being to school, but through this positive framework and by praising their humanity, we're able to really bring that, positivity in the people's life. So there's a book that is called Angriness Doesn't Educate, Calm Educates. So it's in Portuguese. I don't know if English wise it makes sense, but it's really about this positive framework. And as educators, how we can really bring the best into students and really by praising their humanity. That's what I've been learning at the school. And yeah, I'm so grateful to continue to learn from my kids and continue to learn from you. And I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yukari, for those recommendations. I have seen Freedom Writers, but I have not seen Monster yet. So at first I thought you were going to say Monsters Inc., like the Pixar movie. No, but this is this is different. So I'll look into that. Thank you so much, Yukari, for taking the time to be on my podcast and to share your journey and share your incredible insights and these really touching moments of interacting with your students and your fellow educators, and being an example of like what it means to persevere, what it means to create hope from nothing, and just showing up for others. I think that's so important, that's so needed in the world that we live in, where again self isolation and kind of like apathy is really just, I don't know, rampant, given the very troubled times that we're living in. And so choosing not to shy away from that and really decide, I'm right there with you. I'm right there praising you, praising your humanity, the way you phrase it. I love that. And letting you know that for whatever you need, I'll be here. I think that is the mark of a truly humanistic educator. So wanted to give you the last word. Any final thoughts or send-offs that you'd like to share as we wrap up this conversation?
Yeah, so I've been working at the school, and it's called International School for Science and Culture. We doubled, the number of students at our school, and I feel like it's an amazing opportunity for anyone who would like to come and visit and do any exchange program. We're so open to really partner with different people, and yeah, just in a nutshell, we do the trilingual education. The project-based learning is so important, and STEM education, we cannot be citizens nor global citizens if we don't understand, technology, engineering. So it's very important. And yeah, we're doing some really serious hands-on work with the kids. So I would like to keep the invitation open if there's any educator who would like to partner, visit, contribute in their own way, doing workshops, whatever. We are here to continue to have the partnership. And yeah, I'm so grateful for this podcast. Thank you so much, Scott, for the opportunity for me to share, my own thoughts and my own experience. And yeah, I look forward to more partnerships. And yes, all the best for your podcast and for everybody who's listening. Good work. Keep going. You got this. And yes, love for humanity and peace. Thank you.